Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been subscribed for a while, welcome back. Either way, thank you for joining me today. So, in today's video, we are going to be talking about something that I know I'm preaching to the choir about. The topic is an emergency fund. So, this is something that people say they should have, but really do not, because they keep spending their money on other things. But today, I want to talk about why having an emergency fund is so important, and how you can make it a priority even when it seems like there's not enough money to go around. When I first heard about an emergency fund, it was through Dave Ramsey, and at the time it seemed absolutely ridiculous. He said everybody should have $1,000 in a savings account that's just sitting there with no debit card, with no access to it, basically in a separate bank, just so that you could use it only for emergencies. But then, over time, especially once I started getting older and had more responsibilities and things came up that I did not anticipate, I realized that having an emergency fund is one of the best financial decisions you can make for yourself. I would rather have $1,000 in an emergency fund and have to dip into it and then have to rebuild it than to have none and then have to go into debt in order to fix whatever situation that I'm in. An emergency fund can save you from a lot of bad situations, and it can also save you a lot of money on interest payments or other types of fees that you might incur if you have to take out a loan or use a credit card in order to get out of your emergency. An emergency fund is essentially the buffer between you and your long-term goals. It's the buffer between you and those big purchases that you want to make. And when you're saving up for something really big, maybe it's a house, maybe it's retirement, maybe it's paying off debt. Whatever it is, having an emergency fund is what's going to keep you from derailing completely. Think of your life as a train. You know, when the train's going down the tracks and everything is going smoothly, you're on track to reach your destination, which is great, but sometimes there's an emergency up ahead on the tracks. There's something that has happened that you cannot anticipate and you're gonna have to stop. So, having an emergency fund is like having a brake. Your train can hit the brake and come to a complete stop without derailing. But if you don't have an emergency fund and something happens, your life will completely derail and you'll be sidetracked from reaching your goals. And if you have an emergency fund, you can use that money to fix whatever the problem is, and then get back on track much quicker than if you didn't have any emergency money set aside at all. So, before we dive into how to build your emergency fund, let's first establish how much you should have. Generally speaking, the rule of thumb is that you should have 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses stored away in your emergency fund. So, if you're spending $4,000 a month on average, you should have somewhere between $12,000 and $18,000 in your emergency fund. But realistically, the amount you should have saved depends on your situation. If you have a very stable job and you work in a field that's always in demand, then you can probably get away with having less in your emergency fund, because it's more likely that you'll be able to find a new job quickly if you lose your current one. However, if your job is less secure and you work in a field that's highly cyclical, such as retail, then you'll need more in your emergency fund to cover you during the dry spells. You should also consider your dependents when determining how much you need. If you have kids or other people who rely on you financially, you'll need more in your emergency fund so that you can continue to take care of them if you lose your job or if something else happens. Another thing to think about is your health. If you or someone in your family has a chronic illness, you'll probably need more in your emergency fund since medical expenses can really add up quickly. So, do your best to estimate how much you'll need in an emergency and then build up your fund until you reach that goal. Now, when it comes to actually building your emergency fund, there's a few different ways to do it. You can either save up the money all at once or you can build it up over time. Personally, I prefer to build it up over time because it's easier to stick to your budget and save money when you're only saving a small amount each week, rather than trying to save a large lump sum all at once. No matter how you choose to build your emergency fund, the most important thing is that you start now. Even if you can only afford to save $5 a week, that's better than nothing. And once you have some money saved, you can start to increase the amount you're saving each week. So, now that we've talked about how much you should save and how to build your emergency fund, let's talk about where you should keep it. Ideally, you want to keep your emergency fund in a place where it's easy to access but also safe and insured. A good option is to keep your emergency fund in a high-yield savings account at a reputable bank. That way, you'll earn a little bit of interest on your money and it'll be there when you need it. Just make sure that the bank is FDIC insured so that your money is safe. It's also a good idea to keep some cash on hand in case of a true emergency, like if your house burns down or you need to evacuate due to a natural disaster. Having some cash on hand can give you some peace of mind knowing that you have some money to fall back on if you need it. While it may seem like a good idea to invest your emergency fund so that you can make a little bit of money on it, it's not the best idea. Emergencies can happen at any time and you need to be able to access your money quickly. Investing your emergency fund means that you'll have to wait until it's grown to the amount you need in order to use it, and that could be a long time. It can take years to grow your emergency fund if you invest it, and you don't want to wait that long to have the money you need in case something happens. Plus, when you invest, there's always the risk that you could lose money, and you don't want to lose money when it's supposed to be your safety net. So, with that said, let's talk about what you should do if you have an emergency and you need to dip into your emergency fund. First of all, don't panic. Having an emergency fund is exactly what it's intended for, to help you in times of need. So, take a deep breath and assess the situation. Figure out how much money you'll need, and then withdraw the money from your emergency fund. Once you've withdrawn the money, make a plan to repay it back into your emergency fund. This is important so that you don't deplete your emergency fund completely, and then when another emergency comes along, you won't have anything to fall back on. It may take you some time to pay back your emergency fund, and that's okay. Just make sure that you're making a plan to do it and that you're sticking to it. Ideally, you want to have your emergency fund back up to its original amount as soon as possible. This gives you the best chance of being prepared for the next emergency that comes along. So, in conclusion, an emergency fund is so important. It can help you avoid debt, pay for unexpected expenses, and give you peace of mind. It's recommended that you have 3 to 6 months' worth of living expenses saved in your emergency fund, and you should keep it in a safe, insured location that's easy to access. If you have an emergency and need to dip into your emergency fund, just make sure that you have a plan to pay it back as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment below, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.